Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Two Guys and a Bible. It is so absolutely wonderful to be back with you. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Over there in Memphis is William Bell. We've both been gone for a really good long time. And William was in Ghana. I was in Australia, and then I got back and what have you. We both had really kind of interesting trips. We'll get into it. But before we do, I've got to take just a moment here, William, to express my profound appreciation. I know you feel the same way, to Larry Siegel and Rick Calvert.
Yes.
You know, it's absolutely fantastic that you have good friends, men that you trust, men that you know are solid, men that are sound, men that are capable and willing to step in. I mean, almost literally on a moment's notice and just pick right up and present some really, really good teaching. I've seen some great comments on YouTube about how what a good pair they made and what
Yes.
have you. And I've seen that. And so really, really appreciate Larry and Rick for the great job. To me, it's particularly, I say particularly, I mean, you and I both have appreciated Larry for what, 40 years plus, something like that. We've known him for so long. And so we know about Rick, but I had never heard Rick. I knew that he was very capable. I knew that he was one of the top in his class at the Memphis School of Preaching, which is where you and Larry attended. So I knew that he was capable. As a matter of fact, we looked seriously at hiring Rick here at Ardmore years and years ago after we started our congregation. Things just simply didn't work out. And then, to be honest about it, I lost track of Rick for a long time. And then lo and behold, one day I got this text message from him and said, I just want to touch base with you, see how you're doing, appreciate your ministry, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've kind of kept a little bit of contact with each other, but Larry had been in contact with him more than I had by far. And so when I suggested or when I contacted Larry and told him I was going to be out of town, I was going to be out of the States, you're going to be out of the States, could he please fill in? He said, well, yeah, great. I'm going to contact Rick Calvert. And I said, oh, absolutely. Fantastic. So they have been filling in for us. And again, just doing a fantastic job. And the response of the audience has expressed that very idea that they've done a fantastic job. So again, my heartfelt appreciation to the both of them for filling in so admirably while you and I have been gone.
Yeah. Well, Rick and I go back a while, just like Larry. And this goes back to, I believe it was Rick that came over with Larry the first time I met them. I want to say it was Rick. Now, I know he had another guy by the name of Josh with him at one time, but I think it was Larry and Rick Calvert who came over the first time. And when they did, we sat down, we had a conversation. I think I had drawn out a little one-page chart and everything to walk them through some things. We had very good conversation. They had been, studying and hearing about me over at the School of Preaching anyway. And so they came by to have a conversation with me to see if I was a real person, I guess, and all of that.
See if you had these horns
Yeah,
sticking out of your
exactly. Just like everybody over there was saying.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when they left, they were having this conversation between themselves saying, tell me, Larry, this is not true. Tell me, Rick, this is not true. And they said, yeah, it's true. It's true. Well, anyway, after that, Rick and I developed a relationship, and we kind of worked together for a little bit, just a couple of weeks or so. He was preaching somewhere down in Mississippi, and he was very, very zealous and very, just energetic. And after he had learned this and just really, really just on fire. And he thought that with the congregation that he was working with, who seemed to be very accepting of him and very pleased with his work that he was doing, I guess he just kind of overestimated that situation. He thought that they were going to accept him. Well, it was probably kind of like in my situation. After the blowback from the Memphis School of Preaching. I'm sure they had something to do with it.
Yeah.
And contacting that congregation and then telling them all kinds of things about him, as they did me. The congregation decided to let him go, and that just devastated him at the time. So he came to my house and stayed with me for a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that very well because he took Saki's room, right? And Saki was moping. He wanted his room back. And, I'm trying to explain to him, he's just a kid at the time.
Yeah.
Didn't quite understand it. But anyway, he stayed with us for a couple of weeks. And then finally, I think he moved on. I don't know exactly where he went from there, whether he went straight on to Missouri or not. But I know he left. And then we might have stayed in touch for a little bit, but then things kind of took a downturn, I think, for him in terms of his preaching because of that kind of opposition. It just kind of broke his heart. And, we're familiar with that. We know what that's like and the kind of pressures that are on a person. But he was one that, I just thought, he was just so strong at the time, and I just thought. But then when I saw him the other night, I watched I wanted to watch both of them, but I couldn't watch the other one. But the one that they did on Romans 8, I just sat there totally astonished and just enamored with what they were doing. Rick was just firing just like he was back then in terms of his knowledge, his ability and grasp of the scripture, his insights. And it was just absolutely phenomenal to watch them. And the interplay between the two of them, I'm sitting there saying, okay. And, they asked about, they said, look, Don needs to give us a space on the broadcast. And I'm saying, yeah, he does. And let them have a night and we can rest a night. But but they were fantastic. I thought the harmony, the way they resonated together was just really great. Larry was excellent. And, Larry's always been a good host anyway. He has radio experience and everything. So he's just been totally natural in that entire process, along with, with his knowledge and experience over the years. But when the two of them came together, it was something magic clicking between them. And I really liked it. I really did.
Well, maybe we do have to make some arrangements for them to have their own program. That's a really good idea. It is Fulfilled Radio. I own it. I can allot time for whoever wants to. Maybe we need to get them to raise enough money to pay for a slot, so that I don't have to incur that on the show. But I like that idea really, really well because they do have a lot to offer. I thought it was interesting to me that Larry and I were talking on the phone, I think it was, or texting, whichever it was. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, yeah, it was great, but I didn't get to talk very much. He said, Rick just went bloom.
Well, I'm sure after all these years and then his getting that chance to do that really probably encouraged him a lot. But, his tank seemed full to begin with. And he was always like that before. So, that's good.
Absolutely.
It was really great. But I thought they gelled very good together.
Oh, yeah. Everything that I've heard indicates that. And so it would be good to have another program of two like-minded men, two capable men with their own program to express, to develop different topics, different subjects. So I think we're going to have to give that some very, very serious thought. I sure do. Okay, well, let's change gears here just a little bit. You were in Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Australia. Why don't you share with me? You were telling me earlier in the day that you didn't have just tons of stuff to share because you had gone over there for one purpose, for one reason, and you can share all of that with us. And that fell through because of whatever reason,
Yeah.
And so, and my trip didn't go exactly like I had planned either. But go ahead and share with us some of how your trip went, and what you wound up doing to make good use of your trip.
Okay, well, first of all, I always enjoy going there, and a big highlight for me is just to go there and enjoy the food in terms of the natural and fresh fruit. Look, Don, they're in the marketplace, and this is all down the main street and everything. Let's say particularly in Cape Coast. So you go to Abra, and they've got all this, just fresh fruits, vegetables, and everything spread out. And they had mangoes, and you could see the juice, the nectar or whatever, just running out of the actual mango. It was just, I'm saying this is unreal. And I bought I love fruit.
Oh yeah.
And fresh vegetables, et cetera. And so, I bought about a dozen of them. I think I ate about 3 or 4 of them at every meal. And pineapple, the pineapple was so fresh and good. You all the way down to the core. You can eat the core. It's that tasty. A lot of the pineapple here, you're good if you can find something sweet and tasty. And then if you do, you definitely can't deal with that core that's in there. But these pineapple, you can eat even the core and they're still good.
Wow.
So and so that's one thing that I enjoy about going there is just getting that. And of course, that's a quick drop of about 10 pounds. Another thing that happens, when I started going at first, the doctor said, well, don't eat anything off the street and make sure everything that you eat is cooked food. And then you'd get these, I think we would get these pills, for malaria. So we'd have to take those, and you start taking them, I think, a week before you go, and you have to take them a week after you return. And so I did that. But in the last, I think, couple of times that I've gone, I didn't take the pills. I had them with me, but I didn't take them last time. I didn't take them this time. And of course, I've been bitten by mosquitoes and nothing's happened, even though some of the people down there, I think Solomon got malaria one time and, someone else got malaria. But so far, I haven't had to deal with that situation. They did light me up one year I was there. I mean, I had bumps all over me. But no sickness. But the other thing that would happen to me is I would get diarrhea almost every time I went because of, the food is just so natural and without chemicals and stuff like that, it just takes all the toxins out of your body. So initially I would get diarrhea for about a week to a week and a half, and then everything would clear up. The last 2 times, no sign of it. I didn't have to take any medicine or anything. So I think I'm about to get adjusted.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, to the environment there, and so that nothing bothers me in terms of any of those things. So, and that makes it even more enjoyable because you don't have to go through these periods of sickness. But the whole reason I went there, aside from getting some time to rest, from all the work and everything, was to attend the graduation of a young man that he's a preterist, by the way. And he's been booted out too. Years ago, he got booted out from his congregation. He was very good in evangelism and bringing a lot of people to Christ. And but he was also very sharp in covenant eschatology as he's learning and growing. And that's how I met him. I met him through Solomon. At the time I did the debate there. And he was, even during the debate, he asked one question that really, during our Q&A session, when they opened it up to the audience, he asked this particular question on Matthew 24. I don't remember what it is now, but it was a very good question that allowed me to play on that point for the rest of the debate. And I mean, I really socked the guy with it because that was where I put together, and you've heard me do this argument, I put together that argument from Acts chapter 17 when I compare verses 30 and 31 with Matthew 24 and 14.
Right.
But it was because he staked his entire premise on all of these passages in 2 Peter, Matthew 25, and 1 Corinthians 15. All of those were eschatological passages, and he staked, and then he tied in Acts 17. I said, oh, well, there we go.
There we go.
And so once he did that and we tied it in with Matthew 24, I mean, it was like debate over at that point. But anyway, Raymond was graduating. Leo and I, decided, he came to me and asked me to help him to attend university. I think he had been out of school for about a year, didn't know what he was going to do and everything. And, not many job opportunities open over there for the youth. And so he just came to me and asked me if I could help him. Well, I thought, initially I was just going to help him for his initial fees with school. And then it turned out to, he'd come back after a few semesters or whatever, and he needed some more help. And so we ended up just financing his entire college education. Well, he went to Kwame Nkrumah University. It's a technical university in Kumasi. He became the president of his class.
Oh, wow.
He was an outstanding student, and he would send me information from time to time to show me about his accomplishments, and really did an awesome job. And so, now he refers to me as Pops. And he said, Pops, he says, look, he says, I'm graduating. I want you to be there. He says, I do not want to experience this moment without you. He said, you have no idea how you have changed my life, how, you all helping has made an impact on me. He said, I didn't know what I was going to do. He said, but getting me the opportunity to go to school, he said, actually changed my life. And he says, I'm going to really do something with. So he decided to go into technical agriculture. And did an outstanding job as far as his academics were concerned, and all the other extracurricular things he did that he shared with me along the way. And so he wanted me to be there, and I didn't know if I was going to make it at first, because when he first asked, he graduated back in, I want to say, November, and I had just left there, I think in September, September the 12th. I had just gotten back last year in September the 12th. And I'm saying, man, I don't know how I'm going to be able to afford to go back there again. And so he said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put it off. He said, we don't have to, what we call March or whatever, go to the celebration. At this point, we can go to a second one. And I said, okay, if you put it off to March, I will probably be able to go. And I said, I'll do everything I can to go. So I scraped and scraped and scraped, and finally was able to, scrape up enough money to go. And then after I arrived, he tells me, he says, well, they've postponed the graduation. It was supposed to have been on like March the 30th. He said, they postponed it. I said, what? He said, yeah. And I said, well, are they going to read? He said, yeah, it's possible they can redo it. So they reset it, I think, for around the 15th of April. And then he came back and said, it's been canceled again. It's been canceled this time. And I said, what? He said, it's been canceled. I said, Raymond, I said, I've come all the way. This is, we were supposed to enjoy this. He said, they have a new administrative staff in, and I guess somehow they couldn't pull things together or whatever. I don't know what the actual explanation was, but he wasn't able to. They didn't have it, so I wasn't able to attend, and so that was a downer for me in terms
still, you were there though. I mean,
yeah. I came, and he really appreciated it. And by the way, I had him to send me. I said, Raymond, do this for me. I said, just send me a clip of what this experience has meant to you and done. He sent me one, and I was just overjoyed to hear him say in his own words what that meant to him. And so that was one of the highlights of that situation. But aside from that, of course, I did get a chance to do some preaching and some work. We went to Cape Coast, of course, and I always go there because that's where I engage with Solomon, and attended service with him that Sunday. Of course, if I go there, it doesn't matter what's going on. They're going to make me teach the class. They're going to make me do a sermon. And then in the evening, we go to the radio station. And that's exactly what we did. And so we had a good time there. And of course, Solomon and I, shared some things. And we got a few other things that we're working on along the way. I went to see his building. They ended up, some kind of conflict occurred. And the location that he had for his building, which was right on the main road and not too far off the road, would have been a perfect location for it. He ended up having to move that. Must have been some type of land dispute or something. And so they had even started with the foundation. that we're assisting them with. And so he ended up having to move that, and he moved it over to where his congregation is now. They're using a schoolhouse. But it's not as favorable as it's not too far from the road, because I walk the road every time, I go. I can ride over there now, without any assistance. And, I get off and I walk up through the village and everything, and eventually get to the congregation. One time I walked past and they looked out the door. So, oh no, we're right. But anyway, it's in a decent location. As a matter of fact, it's right behind another preacher that gave him a lot of flack. I said, now how ironic is this? He builds his congregation. He's building the building, excuse me, right behind the preacher's house. The preacher's house is about maybe 100, 200 feet there. And the preacher's wife was in service the day that I preached there.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of interesting. So I think, she's pretty accepting of it. He's not at this point, but I did get his phone number and he agreed to have a conversation with me. So we're going to talk. I actually met him. I attended a wedding when I was there, and that was an interesting situation. And so I attended this wedding, and because it was another friend of mine, they made me one of the, what did they call me? I don't know. But anyway, I sat up there with the bride's father and with the groom's father, along with all the other elders and everything. So I was one of the special guests there, because I knew the bride from one of the hotels that I had stayed at before.
I got you.
And we even assisted her through college. She graduated, and she became she graduated to become a school teacher. But anyway, she got married and invited me. She didn't even know I was coming, and just happened to send a message to say, would you come to my wedding? I didn't let her know that I was there, because I was already there, but I was, surprised. And so when I got there, she asked me to be on the program, and I ended up, helping them in this. They had this kind of situation where it was kind of a bidding war, where you help them raise some money. So you name a certain amount of money that you're willing to put up, and then everybody else who wants to challenge that has to put up more, and you keep going until somebody says, they cry uncle. And but I think I end up beating them all out because of the fun of it. It wasn't that much on my part, but I know it was a lot on their part. Yeah. But anyway, it turned out really well. I thought they did very good as a new couple starting out, and but it was real nice. It's kind of a long wedding. It's real nice. But that was my first experience, with being there for that situation. So that turned out well. And then, of course, Solomon is from Accra, which is the main city where the airport is, and it's about a 3-hour drive. And they're building the road, which is good, because one year when I was there, actually back in September, when I went the time before this, August to September, there was a fatal accident on the highway coming back. It's just, a narrow road. And let me tell you something. You have to have all kinds of sedation to ride, to ride in a vehicle on those roads with those drivers. Oh, I tell you what, you have not experienced driving or riding on a road until you do so in Africa.
Wow.
It doesn't matter if you are a pedestrian walking, a motorcyclist, or you drive an automobile or a public transportation bus. They have these little minivans that they drive, and most of the time it's about 15 passengers all packed in. Mm-hmm. And they've like modified them to have another folding seat in the on the aisle, so they seat 4 to an aisle. Anyway. But I usually take, a Ford, I think they're these 250 Fords or whatever, vans or whatever. Mm. And, so we were riding, and they're pretty safe. They're safe. They're air conditioned and everything. But man, look, let me tell you, when they pass on that road, they take chances, Don, that I just sit there And you can have two cars coming in. You got one in the lane that you're traveling in going the opposite direction, and the other one in their lane coming, in that direction. And these guys will come and pass, and they will come right through between the two of you. And I'm sitting there looking, how in the world is this going to happen? And then it's just amazing. They do it all through. And one year I didn't see the accident, but it happened a few, about a mile or so ahead of us. And by the time we got there, the van was over in the field, and several, they reported that several people had died. We had to wait about an hour or two before they got the road cleared up.
Wow.
And then I have a personal driver over there now, and I have to get on him all the time. He's very good. He's a young man, but I get on him all. I said, look, man, I'm not in a hurry to get where we're going. But he has to pass every car on the road. And then he drives that thing like he's Batman or something.
Mm.
But he said he's never had an accident. I said, well, don't make this the first one.
Yeah, let's not have the first one.
But he's good. He's very good. And I've been using him, for the last few years that I go over there, because he's good about taking me anywhere I need to go, especially in Accra. I can maneuver in Cape Coast without any assistance. But when I go to Accra, it's a much bigger city. And so I need help, and places are much farther away along that line. But then the other place that we went to was on the opposite end in the Volta region. And they had a funeral. We were supposed to have 2 days there to teach, and one was a Friday and a Saturday. And that Friday, it had to be canceled because of a funeral. And then, no, Friday, the people came. I don't know why I wasn't there. It was something happened, and I wasn't there or couldn't make it. And a lot of people came. And so we didn't make that one. And so we went for the next, and I had called ahead and told him that I wasn't going to be able to make it. He said, but a lot of people came. And so they said they would come back. Well, that next day there was a funeral. And, if you ever experience a funeral in Africa, that's a situation too. It's a lot of people. It takes a long time, and they expect every relative they know to be there. They're huge events. And so we got there, and we only had about 8 men there, but we had a good time. We taught for about 2 to 3 hours, had a good time, and some of them have been. Well, I know the guy who hosted it; he's been sort of run out too, and so they're considering, and that's what we were considering, starting a congregation with those men who were present, and so that's what we looked at there. And they invited me back. They enjoyed it so much, they wanted me to come back, and they said, next time we want you to get on the radio, because we're getting this pushback. And they said, we might want you to come and do a debate.
Yeah.
And they said, 2 hours on the radio we think would be good, so just prepare for that. So that's kind of that situation. Other than that, it was a lot of good rest, a lot of good food. I experienced some new foods and stuff while I was there, and trying to make sure I get the greens in. But other than that, it was good. It was a long trip, but it was good. It's very good.
Well, that's great. My trip to Australia, and I've told a good part of it. A lot of people know it, but somebody asked me about it. I went into a bank earlier today, and one of the ladies in there that knows me a little bit, she came up to me kind of excitedly. She said, how did your trip to Australia go? I said, well, best way I know to describe it, it was kind of a mixed bag. I said 12 and a half hours into this 17 and a half hour flight, all of a sudden, this tooth on my left-hand side on the bottom, just boom, 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 just pulsating, throbbing. And I was like, whoa, 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 what in the world? I've not had any trouble with this tooth. And it did that for 35, 40 minutes, maybe an hour. And I'm sitting there just like, oh my goodness gracious. And then it stopped. And I go, well, okay, what was that all about? But I get over there, and once I'm down and I'm at the room, I laid down, took a nap. When I got up, it was really, really uncomfortable. And Al Pershon, you remember Al?
Yes.
And he sends his greetings to you. But he said, are you all right? I said, no, I'm not. I said, I got something going on with my tooth. Well, over the next 2 days, it just kept getting worse and worse. And I realized that I had evidently developed an abscess. They managed to get me, thanks to Lauren, Al's daughter, lovely lady. Did you meet her?
I did.
Okay, I thought so. And anyway, she actually used to work for this guy. So she managed to kind of pull a string or two and got me in. And he's going, well, you have this is his term, you have a massive abscess. And of course, I'm going, you reckon? I mean, it's got to be why my jaw is trying to fall off. And he said, well, let's do this and that. He worked on me for 30, 45 minutes. And he said, you've got a massive pus pocket from that abscess. So he said, I'm going to drill in, I'm going to relieve that pus. That's going to get you out of pain. When you get back home, you can take care of everything. Well, okay, so I wound up speaking 9 times over 3 days. And I was in absolute misery every single day.
Mm.
I mean, it was absolutely horrible. Thankfully, that doctor had given me some pain meds. And so I told Al, I said, I don't know if I'm even going to know what I'm saying when I'm up there, Al. I said, but I got to have some relief from this. And I made it through all 9 presentations. And I told Al before I started on the 3rd day, and I said, Al, I feel absolutely horrible. And he said, well, if you don't want to do it, that's fine. I said, well, I don't want to let you down. I said, I've come all this direction. So I said, I'll be able to do it, but I said, I may be about half strength. And he was very gracious. He said, well, way I look at it, Don Preston at half strength is better than anyone else at full strength. I said, well, that remains to be seen. We'll see how this turns out. And the people were very gracious. They were very kind, very complimentary, and I did manage to get through it. Well, I got back and I went to my dentist here, and I mean, literally the only thing that kept me going was the pain meds that the doctor had given me. I'd never had this kind of a problem before.
Mhm.
It was just unrelenting. And I couldn't dare chew on it because that would send me ballistic. And so I went to my doctor here, my dentist, and he said, well, Don, I got to tell you, I don't see any evidence that anybody's worked on that tooth at all. And I said, well, he sure ground around on it for an awful long time. And I said, when I would spit out in the cup, I said, I saw blood and I saw pus.
Mm.
And he said, well, he may have used an exceedingly small drill and tapped into the pus pocket. But he said he didn't get down to the bottom. And he said, that's where your problem is. And he said, I'm not equipped to do this. Okay,
Wow.
so he refers me to Norman, 100 miles north. My wife had been to that dentist before, $2,500 a tooth.
Whoa.
And the dentist, I mean, the insurance does not cover that. I can tell you that. So it's like, whoo, okay, but it's like, do something, we'll pay for it somehow. So anyway, he has the equipment to run a CAT scan instead of just x-rays. And so he did that. I mean, he came into the room where I was waiting for him, and he said, well, Mr. Preston, I don't want to overly concern you. I don't want to make you afraid or anything, but he said, you've got a pretty serious situation going on here. And I said, what do you mean? I said, I knew it was abscess. He said, no, it's far more than that. Oh, okay, this doesn't sound good at all. And he put the slides up, and at the base of each one of the roots back here, of 2 of the roots, the bone, there was a black pocket.
Mm.
And he said, do you see this? I said, sure, anybody could see that. And he said, well, what that is, that's where your root is going into the bone, but the bone has died and is decaying.
Mm.
And he said, this is very serious stuff. He said, so how early can you be here in the morning? He said, I keep early mornings open for emergencies and you qualify.
Mm.
I said, well, you name the time. He said, he goes, can you be here at 7? I said, look, Doc, I can be here at 3 if you want me to. I said, this is not a problem. And he said, well, no, that's pushing early a little bit too much. And he said, well, I've got to go in there. And in addition to doing the root canal, he said, I've got to get under those roots and I've got to take all of that dead bone out because it's poisoning you with that decay. And he said, so I've got to take all that out to allow the good bone to grow back and to join with the tooth if it's going to.
Yeah.
And I said, well, all I know is I've got to have some relief. This is just absolutely horrifically miserable. So I went back the next morning and he worked on me for well over an hour. And so he had me set up and everything. He said, okay, everything's going to be just fine. I said, well, okay, what about some pain meds? And he goes, oh, no, you don't need any pain meds. You're going to be just fine by this afternoon. I was real dubious. I mean, after all, he's been carving around, drilling around, cutting around on that tooth for an hour and a half. And I said, are you sure? He said, oh, yeah, you're going to be fine. Mm. I can assure you he lied to me. Maybe not on purpose, but he lied. Oh, my goodness. When that anesthesia wore off of my face, I was just beside myself. I mean, it was excruciating. And we still had some of the meds from Australia. This guy didn't give me a single med, nothing. And so I told Jan, she was in the bedroom and I walked in. I said, babe, I've got to have some drugs. I got to have something. And so she gave me some, but of course it took 30 minutes, for it to take effect. Mm-hmm. And William, that was 2 weeks ago. Last Wednesday through Thursday afternoon, and even leading up to that, I was sleeping 10 to 12 hours a day. It's number one, the drugs were helping that.
Yeah.
But number two, I didn't feel like doing anything else.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how miserable I was. And of course, I was taking antibiotics. And on Saturday morning, lo and behold, I woke up and it was like a brand new day. It was like, well, okay, I feel almost human again. And ever since then, I felt considerably better. Now, today, I've had lots and lots of pressure on that jaw. Mm-hmm. Pardon me, I'm not going to call it pain, but it's pressure to let me know it's there. And so for probably the first time in 2.5 days, I'm going to have to take some pain meds tonight so I can go to sleep. But that was my trip to Australia. I mean, I've never experienced pain like that as far as the tooth is concerned. But the conference over there was absolutely fantastic. You know how hospitable the people are. Yes. They're absolutely wonderful. And I've got to mention Silvana DeAndrea and her daughter. They made me allow them to be my taxi. Mm. Her daughter is Jana, lovely, lovely girl. And they demanded that they be my taxi everywhere I wanted to go, anywhere I wanted to go. And I was standing at the bar in the hotel, which is where you ordered your food. And I couldn't even understand most of the food. You would have loved it, but you know how I am. I'm meat and potatoes, and I don't even know what half this stuff is. And an employee there, she said, "Can I help you? Do you need help with the menu?" I said, "Boy, do I ever."
We were in Australia when you tried that Indian dish.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We had to force you to do that, but you liked it.
Lamb and dry.
Some type of lamb curry or something.
Yeah. It was lamb, and then we had the beef vindaloo,
Yeah.
and lamb
Yeah.
madrosh, and both of
Okay.
them are great. They're
Yeah.
absolutely wonderful. In fact, I wanted some over there this trip, and no one had it.
Mm.
I was like, "What's going on here? This is the only place I've ever eaten this stuff."
What was that other stuff that we ate? That Vita something?
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I don't want to talk about that. That's vile. They tried
Yeah.
to get me to eat some of it.
Really?
After the services one evening, we all went, about 50 of us or more, to a local pub, as they call it. A
Mhm.
very, very lively place, and we're all sitting around, and somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, Don, have you? Well, what's the name of that stuff?" Um,
I
I,
can't
I'm
remember.
sorry, I can't remember. We'll call it Vita something rather. Anyway, they said, "You've got to try our local delicacy." I said, "No, I've already been there, already done that. I did not like it. I do not want." I said, "William and I were over here before." And I said, we were connived into trying it. Well, I said, well, we wanted to try it just to say we had. And I said, but we both swore we'd never do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of an acquired taste. And I said, I don't think I could live long enough to acquire a taste for that stuff.
Vitamite or something. I don't know what that stuff is.
Uh,
Did you just hang out in Sydney, or did you go
yes.
to so you didn't go to Wagga Wagga or any place like
No,
that?
we did not go to any of the other places that you and I were privileged to go on the previous trip.
Mm.
Uh, I can tell you this, Al was extremely pleased. He's already talking about next year, perhaps having you and one other person on a, I think he said like a 4 or 5 city speaking tour.
Oh, that sounds
Yes.
good.
He actually asked me initially. He said, "Who do you think?" I said, "Well, William Bell's the obvious one." He said, "Well, what about one other?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "We definitely need one other," and so I named him. He's a guy that's probably going to be moving to Australia.
Mm.
And he said, "Okay." He said, "I've been talking to him. I know him. He seems to be very, very good." So those are the tentative plans. But I told him, I said, "Look, I can't do a 4 or 5 city tour, you know, do 4 or 5 presentations, city lessons in
Mm.
one city, fly to another city, and do it all over again." I said,
Yeah.
I'm not a young chick anymore. Uh, I said, so got to have some help along the way. And so he said, well, that's great. Who do you suggest? I said, William Bell. And I called the other name. And he liked that idea because, like I said, he had already spoken to him one time. So that's in the tentative works, William.
Okay.
We don't
Well,
have we don't have a schedule for it yet, but he's already working on it. He's working on the finances for it, and what have you. He's evidently been able to come up with some financial sponsors who are excited about the work, who are willing to help finance the work, and so that's kind of where we're at in it. I mean, that's super exciting about the possibility of going 3 or 4 cities and have 3 guys speaking, and then going to another city as he envisions it. Fly to another city, have one day of full rest, speak, fly to another city, day of full rest, speak, and go on. So
yeah.
it really, really sounds exciting to me.
Yeah, that was a great experience the first time that we got a chance to do that. And I think we hit uh we might have hit 4 cities then because we went to the capital city
Right.
after Sydney, and then we went to Wagga Wagga, but we also went to
Brisbane. Wasn't it
Brisbane.
Brisbane?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
We had Sydney, Brisbane, Wagga, and Canberra.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It's been a while, so I couldn't remember all the cities.
Yeah.
You talk about your tooth story. I had a tooth story too. However, mine was much more mild than yours. But what happened was I'd had a root canal on one of my teeth in the front, and the dentist that we had used to, she's was not far from this neighborhood. Actually, she was in our neighborhood, and so she was just down the street. So about 10 minutes away to get to the office, et cetera. But she had done this a while back. I had gone to a dentist, and man, he like to broke my jaw, working on it. And I vowed never to go back to him. So we actually found this dentist through Leora, Very nice lady, very just professional, dental office and everything. Everybody in there was very good, and staff was pleasant, and she just had a good, air about her. And so she did a root canal, and it was fine. And she actually told me, she said, "Well, this is my specialty, root canals."
Huh.
And so she might have done one or two. And I remember her taking the root out and showing me, "See, here it is right here. I'm done, blah, 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 blah." And because I was so afraid because of the way the other male dentist had hurt, I didn't even want her to touch me. And when she did it and said, "I'm done, and that's it," I said, "Are you?" I said, "I never felt anything," and I didn't. And so I wrote a review online, and she started getting all kinds of business from it as a result. And she even let me know how pleased she was from that review. And she told me several times. She actually took us to dinner,
Oh,
as a
wow.
result of that, because she got so much business from the review that I wrote. Well, she closed her office down to our disappointment. I mean, she was the go-to dentist. And so she closed her office down over here, decided she was not going to be in dentistry anymore. And I guess, maybe the bug bit again. So she got another office that's not too far from us. And we decided to go back. I had just gone to a dentist around the corner and found out she was back. So we said, okay, we're going back to her. And when I got there, they did a x-ray, the new patient x-ray again. I had to go through all of that
Yeah.
in a different office. And they found out that there was some, I don't think it was an abscess, but there was some infection in the tooth
Hmm.
where it seemed that they didn't get all the root out or something when you didn't clean the root out. It was something to that effect. So she recommended me to a specialist. She says, "I'm not going to do it." She said, "I can do it, but I'm going to send you to a specialist." So she recommended me to a specialist. And I went there about a day before I was getting ready to leave, or a day or two before I was getting ready to leave. And so he looked at it. He said, "Okay, we're going to have to schedule you to come back in and get this out." He said, "Because it's clearly something there." And he asked me, "Did it pain me?" I've not had a pain since I left her dentist years ago in terms of that. But he said, "We need to get it out because it could cause a problem." And so I said, "Okay." And they said, "Well, we can't get you until about 2 weeks or a month later." And I would have been well into the trip by that time, so they
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to do it. And as I was checking out at the desk, I said, "Oh, we just got an opening. Can you be back here tomorrow?" And I was leaving the next day,
Oh,
after
wow.
that.
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Yes, I can come back." So I came back the next day. He worked on it. I don't know how long, maybe 15, 30 minutes or whatever, but it done. And first he said, "I'm going to stick you here in the back." And he said, "That's going to deaden everything, and then I'll do once in the front." And he did. And it worked out just like he said it would. No problem. He finished. I never felt anything. Of course, he recommended some pain medication. I usually never fill them, or if I go buy them, I never take them. That's just the way I am. Even when I had the automobile accident, they gave me Percocet. I took it once in the hospital. I saw goblins, and I said, "No."
Yeah. Yeah. I don't like Percocet at
I
all.
said, "I will not take it anymore." So I just endured the pain until my foot healed. But anyway, I wouldn't take any medication because every time they asked me, they said, "What are you allergic to?" I said, "Poison ivy and drugs." But anyway, so I came home. I never felt anything. And I said, "Well, what can I eat?" And he said, just, I don't even know if we discussed it or whatever, but I know, when you leave the dentist, you're not supposed to eat any
Right.
hard. Look, I was having no pain. So I just said, "Well, look, I might as well eat some good food, man." I chopped in, I chopped in on a really good dinner that night and ate. And I guess a day or so later, the drug had started wearing off enough to
Yeah.
where I began to feel a little something. And I felt some pain there. It still wasn't really bad. But I thought about it. I said, I just aggravated that tooth, thinking that I was in the clear and that nothing was going to happen. So it pained a little bit. And then for about the first week when I got to Ghana, just slight pain, but never anything really serious. And now it's gone. So I didn't have the kind of experience you had, but I did have a little tooth situation. going there. So hoping that didn't make you feel bad.
Well, I would have given a lot of money for it to have been minor pain. Like I said, I've never experienced that kind of pain,
Yeah.
that kind of tooth pain, especially. And you know, you mentioned a dentist being able to do it. You don't even not even feel it. Well, on the bottom side of my right hand side, I had a filling that I had had since I was 11 years old, literally.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it finally came out, you know, and my dentist, my local dentist, he said, "Boy, Don, I wish I could salvage it," but he said it's just a fragment, you know. So he said it's going to have to come out. So he does his, and I got to tell you, he's as good at using the needle. You never see the needle with him.
Mm-hmm.
You never see it. So he deadens me all up. And he says, "Well, okay, let's see what we can do here." And I saw him grab the pliers, and I thought, "Well, okay, here we go. He's going to rip my jaw off, you know." and and he's a pretty good sized guy. He's probably about 6'2", 6'3". He's not quite as large as you are, but he's a pretty tall guy. And next thing he knows, he says, "Well, I'm going to have to step back for a minute here, Don." He said, let's go ahead and have you set up." I said, "Okay." And I said, "If you don't mind, let me go to the bathroom and I'll come back and you can finish." He said, "Oh, no, no, I'm finished." I said, "What?"
Mm-hmm.
And he pointed over on the tray. He said, "There's your tooth right there."
Wow.
I never felt it come out. I never
Mm.
felt one thing. And, you know, I had pain meds for the rest of the day, never had a bit of problem. But boy, this one on the other side, and it's all because, obviously, of the abscess and how much it was infecting that
Mm-hmm.
entire jaw. I mean, I was having headaches that were pulsating all the way around from temple to temple and just pounding, pounding, pounding. And that's why I was sleeping. I mean, I would come over to the office a little bit. I would sit here and basically just stare at the computer, like, what am I trying to say? What am I? And I, of course, like you, I've got books over there at the house scattered everywhere to be reading, and I'd pick one up and I'd read a page and then just go, "What did I just read? I don't understand. I don't even know what I just read."
Yeah,
So
that's pain will do that to you.
yeah. And so, you know, basically I would sit there and look at the TV and not even know what I was watching on TV. I mean, that the last 5 weeks, and it's every bit of 5 weeks, going on 6 now, has just been almost a blur with me. And so it's not been a very pleasant time. But like I said, I'm extremely, extremely pleased that I am better. It's great to have you back in the saddle. And William, I thought, in fact, I had thought, well, if we get through a little bit early tonight, talking about our respective trips, we might dig into this and what we can do tonight. And we do want to get back to the subject of the Messianic Temple. We've been walking through Hebrews, and we had gotten into chapter 9 and what have you. But there's a topic that you and I both feel very, very, very strongly about. And that is the relationship of the Abrahamic promises to the story of eschatology. You know, we very commonly, rightly so, emphasize Israel's role in eschatology. But could it be possible that we're not spending enough time developing the centrality of the Abrahamic promises, how they play into the promises of Israel, and are really the key to the time of fulfillment of the eschatological promises that were even made to Israel? So that's kind of what I have in mind, for at least for 2 or 3, maybe 4 programs,
Okay.
depending on how we get into it. And I'm pretty familiar with how you and I generally roll. We'll get started on it and it'll last for 40 years. But but again, I felt like this was something, and I have been going back over an awful lot of material that I've developed over the years. And I've been looking at it particularly over the last several weeks, except for the last 5. But I've been looking at it over the last several weeks in regard to this issue of the Israel only doctrine.
Mm.
And it seems to me that this entire issue of the Abrahamic promise is so foundational to understanding eschatology, but that it is almost being overlooked in the discussions and the controversy with the Israel only people. Have you given that a whole lot of thought?
I haven't, in terms of, tying it into the Abrahamic promise. I do know, um, and believe that the Abrahamic promise is so central to the subject of eschatology because even in looking at the text, both for Paul and Peter, they both use it in terms of Galatians 3 and then Acts chapter 3, and root their eschatology and fulfillment into all the way back to the Abrahamic promise. So from that perspective, I think it is worth some time to look at, and I think it's I mean, I just really love the idea of that relationship that both apostles make with it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Galatians 3 and 4, as you were hinting at right there, to me, make it so abundantly clear that the eschatological goal was never Israel. The eschatological goal was always the fulfillment of the Abrahamic promise at the end of Old Covenant Israel. And that's not something that I see being developed. I know Max touched on it years and years and years ago.
He did.
And to be honest about it, I wasn't paying enough attention. And so here in my later years, I'm looking at it, relooking at it and going, holy cow. And so I'm going to go back into some of the Living Presence magazines. I've got the entire series indexed, so I can go back and look up the series, and I've got them in great big folders and what have you that, okay, I can go get them and read those to glean what Max had to say about the Abrahamic promise and eschatology. But as I was suggesting there, Galatians chapter 3 and 4 is so clear. And so when people talk about today, and rightly so, as we've said many, many, many times, all eschatological promises in the New Testament are nothing but the reiteration of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel. That's perfectly fine, and it's absolutely valid and true, but it's not the totality of it. And so that's what I would like for us to develop.
Okay.
Any final thoughts that you'd like to throw out there?
No, just good to be back. Good to see you. And I'm glad that, your health has improved because, I kind of read a little bit of the issues that were going on with you. And of course, you've shared that more extensively tonight. But I'm glad you're back in the saddle. I'm glad to hear about Al Pershone.
Oh, yeah.
And, what's going on in Australia, that he's still, going strong and the prospects of our getting together to, be back there at some time in the future. So I think that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I don't know if you're aware that Annette, his wife, had passed away.
No.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, she passed away several months ago. They actually live streamed the funeral. It was more than touching. He preached her funeral, William. I have no earthly idea how a man does that.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I could not preach Jan's funeral at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. I just simply would not be able to do it. But he did a magnificent job, and it was a very, very moving service. But anyway, okay.
And that Joy passed away right before I left. I did her funeral.
Yes,
the day before. Yeah,
you had mentioned that to me. Yes, indeed. Hated to hear that. She's a wonderful lady for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, all right. I think we're going to call it quits on that for this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for Two Guys in a Bible. Didn't have a whole lot of Bible tonight, but I hope you enjoyed us discussing the things going on in our respective ministries and what is in store for the future. Some really, really exciting stuff going on. From my perspective, I just hope I live long enough to do some of this.